Hello everyone, welcome back to Flying Through the Helicopter Handbook. This video we're going to continue our discussions from Chapter 11 on emergencies. So last time we talked about straight-in auto rotations, so now we're going to add a little bit of twist, or maybe a turn if you will. And we're going to talk about auto rotations with turns. So in the end of it, an auto rotation with a turn is going to end as a straight-in auto rotation, but of course the stuff in the middle is going to be a little bit different. So what's going on with an auto rotation that involves a turn? So if you look at the Helicopter Flying Handbook, they have a really good hint here. And they say, hey, when you're approaching the 90 degrees of your turn, if you're doing a 180-degree auto rotation, you should start evaluating, how am I doing in terms of hitting my spot? Right. So let's kind of walk through a 180 auto real quickly and talk about the different things that are going to go on as you are doing this auto rotation. So you're beam your spot, you decide it's time to enter your auto. So just as with the straight-in auto, it's going to be down right aft. And now what you want to do is immediately start your turn. Now, if the wind is really blowing, you will have to turn tighter. If the winds are light, then you will have to turn a little bit less. So it's down right aft and then start your turn. As you come around in the turn, there's a couple of things that will happen. When I turn, I increase the load on the rotors. When I increase the load on the rotors, I'm going to cause them to cone up more. And if you think back to the little figure skater that's bringing their arms in, you know that when they bring their arms in, they go faster. So guess what? You cone the rotors more by loading them down. Now they're going to spin faster. So as you're coming around in this turn, you want to be aware of your rotor RPMs. So you want to monitor that and make sure that you apply a little bit of up collective if required. Now, of course, this is going to vary from one helicopter to the next. If you're flying a little R-22, you have to be very careful because, again, there's no inertia in those rotors. They're very light, and they will change speed quickly. So as you come around, anticipate possibly having to bring in a little bit of up collective. And then as you roll out of the turn, you're probably going to have to drop the collective a little bit. So you're coming around, you get to your 90-degree point, and then you can decide, hey, am I going to overshoot or undershoot this spot? If I'm going to overshoot, then I can be a little bit more casual on the bank for the second half of this turn. I can make it a little wider of a turn. If, on the other hand, I go, oh no, I'm going to be short, then I crank in the bank. Now, of course, as I crank in the bank, it's going to up my rotor speed. So I want to be careful about that. Another thing you want to be careful about as you're in this turn, you want to maintain the appropriate pitch. Normally we say spot speed RPMs. And if we're looking at the speed, we want that constant pitch picture. Now, it's not unusual for the airspeed indicator to move a little bit as we go throughout this turn. Because if there's a strong wind, as we're turning and we're at the 90-degree point, we now have a lot of wind blowing from the side, if you will. And there's leads and lags, of course, in the airspeed indicator. And then as we come back into the wind, the speed might drop off and then come back. as I turn the last 90 degrees. So that's something to be aware of. So you come around, and at the end of it, it's just a straight-in auto rotation. Sounds easy, right? Of course, one of the harder parts of the 180 auto, especially if you're doing this for a commercial or a CFI check ride, which is probably when you're doing this, is that you have to hit your spot within plus or minus 100 feet. And if you don't know what the wind is doing to you that day, you might have a little bit of a difficult time. Okay, so other things that they'll talk about, there's a lot of room for error. So for the straight-in auto, they talked about 9 common errors, and we've doubled that. We're at 18 common errors. So what are some of those common errors? We enter the maneuver at an improper altitude or airspeed. Sometimes we're trying to get a little bit of extra altitude for this turn, and we might be a little slow. Or we didn't get enough altitude. We're a little bit low. We enter it and we're already in a climb or a descent. You know, we want to set yourself up for success. That's what I always tell my students for check rides. You know, don't be in a rush. Set yourself up for success. So they're not level or they're not in coordinated flight. They might enter the maneuver and not correct for the deceleration to a steady state attitude. And what happens is they get excessive airspeed loss in the descent. They didn't have good pitch control. Number 4, improper transition into descent on entry. You know, and again, it depends on what you're flying. If you're flying a little R-22, you kind of have to nail the entry. Otherwise, you just fight it the whole way down. 5, improper use of anti-torque on entry. Downright aft. Maybe you didn't put in enough right pedal, or maybe you tried to turn with the right pedal. Obviously, it's not very efficient that way, and it's not going to go well. Failure to establish the appropriate crosswind correction, allowing the aircraft to drift. It's not always straight down the runway, so you're going to have to apply a crosswind correction most of the time. Number 7, failing to maintain coordinated flight through the turn. Again, too much pedal or no pedal. Neither of those is efficient, and you're going to lose excessive altitude. Number 8, failure to maintain rotor RPM within the RFM recommended range. Once again, it's going to be a little bit harder because of the turn. You're going to load up the rotors, and that's going to affect you. Number 9, excessive yaw when increasing collective to slow rate of descent during power recovery autorotations. We talked about that a little bit in the last video, where I want to ideally, let's say I'm flying something like a Schweitzer, I would want to be in the middle of that outer RPM range so that when those needles rejoin, it's not going to yaw all over the place. Number 10, during power recovery autorotations, a delay in reapplying the power. If you delay too much, you might actually contact the ground. Number 11, initial collective pull either too high or too low. Again, it's going to vary from one helicopter to the other. In the case of the Schweitzer, minus the turning effects, you can probably just throw it down and leave it down. You might have to do a little check up in the turn. In the Robinson, you're probably going to have to pull it up and then push it down a little bit. And then when you turn, you're going to have to pull it up again. And then when you stop turning, you're going to have to push it down again. Number 12, improper flare. Too much or not enough. Number 13, flaring too low or too high. Either you flare super high, and if you're doing it for real, you're going to come slamming down on the ground, or you do too low and you're still flaring when you hit. Number 14, failure to maintain heading when reapplying power. Again, if you have that needle where it should be, this is less of an issue. 15, not landing with a level altitude. So you don't land with a level attitude, you hit the heels first, it smacks the nose down. Or if you're real extreme about it, you could strike the tail. 16, landing with aircraft not aligned with the direction of travel. We talked about this in the last one. You can roll the helicopter. 17, insufficient collective cushioning during full auto rotations. Sometimes people will do a full down auto and they don't pull the collective all the way. They're a little bit afraid to pull too much. And 18, abrupt control inputs on touchdown during full auto rotations. I always like to say slow, smooth, small. So even if you're going somewhat quickly, smooth is good. A while ago, a friend of mine who was a world champion skydiver used to say, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So trying to be fast usually results in jerky motions. So if you try to go slow and smooth, you might end up being just as fast or faster. And the helicopter will like you a lot more. All right, with all of that said, let's go flying. Well, here we are at the Mount Pocono Airport. And we're going to go ahead, take off, and we will do a couple of auto rotations. Okay, coming up on a beam my spot, down right aft, turning, that nose up, starting my turn. Little check up on the collective, spot speed RPMs, 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 and we'll recover. Like so. Let's go ahead and do another one. All right, I'm gonna beam my spot, so it's gonna be down right aft. Bringing it around, a little check on that collective, a little more up on the collective, coming around, spot speed RPMs, spot speed RPMs, transitioning to a straight in, and right about here, I'm gonna flare and recover. All right, I beam my point, down right aft, turning, spot speed RPMs, spot speed RPMs, getting that collective up, coming around, spot speed RPMs, spot speed RPMs, spot speed RPMs. Now we're gonna flare and pull that up. And that's a full down auto, which is a little bit tricky to do in the sim, but it seems like we managed and survived. Okay, so that's it for this video, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.